Welcome to the YouMeVerse podcast. We're your hosts, Jeffrey and Odette. Together we have thousands of hours of yoga and meditation experience.
Here, you get to be butterflies on the wall and listen in on our joyous spiritual conversations about how these practices have and continue to transform us. Thank you for joining. Testing?
I can hear you.
All right, perfect. So, how are you today?
I'm great.
Awesome.
I feel great.
Yeah.
Yes. Rest. Yep.
I made a determination that I'm definitely not talking over you ever again.
Like we're not in the same room, so I mean, like that's definitely a part of it. And it's, I mean, I don't get offended really that easily. So
yeah. But I'd love to hear what you have to say. And a lot of people don't listen. I realize.
Know. It's not really anyone's fault, though. I mean, I don't think I knew how to listen for a long time. And it's still a skill I need to practice.
Yeah.
Active listening.
What's interesting is that even the things that our people are saying, we're asking for in some way. Mm-hmm. And when you listen to it and not try to speak over it or talk beyond it, you realize there's something there for you. So that's why for me too, like I say, it's not because I want to be even more considerate. It's because I recognize there's something here that I'm asking for. So I definitely want to hear whatever that is.
Yeah.
Because everybody also has a different way in which they speak. And I feel like I've gotten really good at recognizing your pauses and the way in which you kind of organize your thoughts and then your speech. Versus when we first were talking months ago, I was just kind of spewing everything nonstop.
Well, I mean, you were used to what you called translating, and so you would just keep going. And yeah, you sent me a message yesterday when you had like the caffeine and you were excited and like you had a lot of things to update me on, and it was like it reminded me of the Abraham rampages that I discussed in the last podcast, where it's like she doesn't even breathe, but you can still follow it, and it's like this rhythm. And but I understand what you're saying. If it's like an interaction, then I had other people tell me in the past that sometimes people learn not to give other people pauses, especially in business, because you want to get your point across, and whoever's louder in the room is the one who makes the most impact. And I don't know that that's true. Yeah. I mean, for me, I just know personally, I don't enjoy that very much, being talked at or talked to. Yeah. Because it does feel like they don't care what you think at all. Right. You're just an audience. But no, I've never felt like that, even when you were speaking, more
in that way. Yeah.
Connected like that. Yeah.
There is a big difference. I mean, yesterday when I was messaging you, that was just one green tea. And
yeah, that made me giggle.
Yeah, that was a lot. But that's the difference. That was me being in the mind, being in the physical, like, just doing what a lot of people do. There's a big difference in that and allowing the energy to flow through me or anyone doing that. It can seemingly be similar, but it's so different because one, you're kind of like pushing things out. The other, you're just allowing it to flow through. So yeah, you made that remark yesterday and I was like, yeah, it's kind of, I see that. But if I was to drink caffeine every day, it wouldn't have that same effect. It's because I have, maybe a green tea once every week or 2 or 3, so it's so minimal. Mm-hmm. And then, it kind of is a similar experience, but yeah. For some reason, there was a lot of energy yesterday, even regardless of the caffeine, which really isn't that much. But then also the new year happened.
It did.
2022. Happy New Year for foremost.
Happy New Year.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's just crazy. It's crazy.
The new year?
It all feels the same. It all feels the same to me.
It does for me too, but it's never been that big of a deal. I always just thought, well, it's just the calendar switching over. But for some reason, this last month or two, there's been a lot of stuff that I felt was different. And then I did not necessarily celebrate this year any different, but I did feel like there is this opportunity here. This is really what it comes down to. I was writing the Me Treat Kauai email for everybody yesterday. And then I was talking about Happy New Year 2022. And then I thought back to numerology. And you and I talk about this, that whatever is real is just what you give your attention to. And I thought, well, 6 is in numerology like unconditional love. It's like hope. It's like light. And kind of felt that way this whole last year. I felt like 2022 was going to be another shift. And because I was giving my attention to that for so long, I thought, well, I'm going to witness this manifest in some way. Perhaps
I love that.
Not just in my experience, but in a broader way too, in the collective experience. And then I noticed there was so many more people saying stuff about that on New Year's, like on social media, and people that were messaging me. And it was different than things in the past, where most people it's just like Happy New Year. But I noticed a big difference in how people were optimistic. And I thought, well, there we go. And I gave my attention to that because I wanted to give my attention to that. And it reminds me of something we talked about when I was in Sedona, when we were talking about crystals. And I was showing you a new crystal I got, necklace, because I lost my rose quartz. And you had made the comment, I don't remember exactly what you said. And then I said, well, I want to give my attention to this and make this true because I am accepting this kind of collective agreement with people that particular crystals may have particular vibration and energy, and therefore can have these potential results, as opposed to just saying everything that I believe by myself in this void is what my reality is and what I want to be true. So there is this benefit of ascribing to things that other people have made true in their experience. And that's kind of what's always happening. But I just thought that was interesting, and I wanted to remark on that because I did feel excited about 2022 for myself and for others, and for even what you and I have, or what I've talked about with you just in the last week or so, about all the things that we've been doing and the things that we're creating and how much we've created already. And I can see all these things kind of coming to fruition. So yeah, I mean, in the last 3 months, I've done more in the physical world than I've done in the last probably year. And there's been a lot of energy and inspiration coming through me in that way. I
mean, I was excited about it too. I think that collective kind of renewal, you can hop on that. Like everybody wants to kind of start over in some way. And I do enjoy that. And we did celebrate, and I stayed up, and what I meant was it feels the same as in like after having meditated so much last year, just that feeling of when I go back to meditate, it's very similar every time. It's me coming into the now with myself, and moments or memories that pop up when I was by myself in the past, I can really revisit that almost like it's still happening. And it feels like it's the same. It's still now. So I like that collective starting over and participating with that, because I did make a decision as the clock was going down with my family. I was like, you know what? I'm just going to really stick to this. Like everything I've learned from Abraham and Neville Goddard, like I'm going to stop waffling on this stuff. Like I know what to do. As soon as this spills over into 2022, I'm going to be living like the person I want. And I really have been doing that. It's been a few days, but I've been doing a really good job because I made that firm decision. But yeah, I really do feel like it's just like it's like the same moment over and over and over again. And we just like to measure things.
Yep.
So I don't pay that much attention to time.
Yep.
In general.
And that kind of overlaps with what you're saying with me. And that is, in my past, I never ascribed to anything. I never said, well, this is what people are doing, and so I'm going to be part of it. It was always just my own world. And I never kind of realized that until later. But now it's choosing to utilize those things that people are collectively creating just for the moment, for the fun of it, or just to add momentum to it for the self or for others. And that's really this last year what I've been doing too, with all things, whether it be celebrations in other ways or holidays or whatnot. But not that being something that's necessary for any moment to do or have or change or whatever, but just because it's happening, or just being a part of it because it's there. And so that was, I don't know, for some reason that seems maybe even silly for a lot of people.
What's silly?
Because so many people are accustomed to doing that. They're accustomed to just being a part of the things that are already created, whether it be holidays or rituals or whatever. But you and I think, are a little different, and that those necessarily weren't as big to us as they were others, because of the things we've talked about already, say on the podcasts, and how we were already connecting to ourselves in this more deeper and yet subtle way. And so these things didn't really mean as much as it does to others. Like, for example, a celebration for New Year's, or a celebration for a particular holiday that has been celebrated for however millennia or whatever it might be. But like I said, now, harnessing that energy that's coming from that, because there is an energy coming from it.
From celebration?
Yeah. Like, like New Year's, for example, like that renewed sense of optimism, even if it only lasts for a day.
Yes, right.
But for me, it's like, okay, I carried that, and I can carry that now for weeks and months or whatever. It's almost like an orbit. It's like just going around a planet, just picking up that momentum and then just continuing on a trajectory, to the next gravitational field in some way.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I'm all about any reason to celebrate and have fun. I remember at the meat treat in Sedona, we had 2 birthdays. We had two of the guests had birthdays, and we got in a circle and sang happy birthday, and everybody else celebrated their unbirthday.
Yeah.
Because you can always choose to have that celebratory energy. Not that you have to be so high every day, but yeah, every day is your unbirthday, unless it's your actual birthday. And last year on my birthday, it's just this awareness of you celebrating you. And my day was a little bit different. I had people who would talk longer to me. I had puppies running up to me. Like my neighbor's dog just ran up and was being so adorable. And yeah, the whole day was like that. And I know I can
do that every day.
Have that orientation to my day every day. And I think we even talked about that as an idea at the meat treat before we left. Like, what if every day you treated it like that? Like it's your birthday. It's like a day to celebrate you and being alive. And I really like that.
Yeah.
As an overall idea. So I'm all about celebration for sure.
Yeah.
Just having fun.
This is what was coming to me as you were saying that. When people think that it's not them, or they don't realize how much power they have of their experience, regardless of what they're doing, but just how they're choosing to give where they're giving their attention. And I wonder why you actually mentioned this last night or yesterday evening about how everything is us individually. We're our own universe, our own experience, and we're attracting everything. And you even said, and it's the same thing that I wonder about too sometimes. And that is, how do people not know this, like to this level? That's why I always talk about this continual unfolding of awareness of how much that is. And it's because I think this is what the question really comes down to, is that even in these more subtle levels where people are like, well, just happiness is an inside job. But to the degree in which it's attracting everything, to the degree in which it's literally creating all of the experiences that you're having, I think it's because it's not in real time. It can be, depending on where your energy is flowing, but because there's these variations in how it manifests, depending on where you're at energetically, I don't think people associate it with them. And so then at times they do feel like it is, and then other times they don't. But then there's never this real connection to this complete knowingness that it's all them.
Yes. And I know that's a big step, and we've talked about that a lot, how that's like taking that responsibility for everything in your life is like a big step, especially if there are things that don't feel that awesome in it. So yeah, I mean, I understand how. I mean, I didn't know that for a long time.
Yeah.
But yeah, I knew, like on my birthday, I had already been practicing this inner awareness for a while, but I did notice how people were friendlier to me and how things I wanted that just delighted me were showing up, like the dog, like the dog just running over and being so sweet and just adorable and making me laugh. And everyone, and I went out to dinner that night, and I was treated so well. And like everybody in the restaurant sang happy birthday to me, like every single person. And it was just, I knew like my orientation to my day as being a celebration about my life. It was just being reflected back to me.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to be just that one day.
Right. You were mentioning something else yesterday too. And it was kind of overlapping with experiences I was having yesterday. And that is, you talked about momentum. We talked about that last night a little bit. And it goes back. I made this comment in a previous episode about when you are on this trend, when you're kind of like in a place that you don't want to be, or it just feels like there's a little bit of resistance or whatever negative mood. And I talked about how easy it is that it can literally take 5 minutes to shift by doing, say, 5 minutes of meditation or just breath work or whatever, and then noticing that shift, and then how you can fuel it by then witnessing the manifestations, like physically, but even before they're physical, just even noticing the mood and then just appreciating the mood. And then you can shift a day from going to the most challenging or stressful or resistance or whatever to the greatest. But for me, when you were mentioning that yesterday, that's why. And I said to you, if there's something that is positive momentum, I will give attention to that and milk it over and over and over again. And it reminded me when we were in Sedona, when we were driving, and I mentioned that to you yesterday. We talked about a subject and I could feel the energy and the excitement of it. And then I just kept talking about it and kept talking about it. And that's why whenever I'm around other people that aren't aware of these things, you and I talk about this a lot. How do we influence others that are in our experience, that are maybe close to us because they are, say, family or friends from the past, obviously families from the past, but even older friends, and then just guiding their attention, just planting a seed. And then they'll start talking about that, because when you're in those lower states, you're not really aware of what you're doing. And then when you guide them to another topic, then you just add the fuel. As soon as they go there, you just keep it going. And then that momentum just carries off like fire, like wildfire. And so for me, I feel those things are so easy to do. And that to me was a microcosm of that experience, that example I gave a couple of times ago. And then how you can do that with all those that you're co-creating with all the time. And that really is where it is you, that you don't have to rely on other people to keep that momentum. It still is always you at any given time, but it is nice to have others that are aware, because then they add to it as well with that in that intentional way, knowing that that's what they're doing.
Yes. And I think we've talked about that in several previous podcasts, that idea of the journey to becoming aware that you influence your experience. And then to the extent that you believe that or play with that. I wanted to rephrase what you said in another way, like adding the momentum to things. Basically, like if something wonderful is happening, something that has you feeling wonderful, just continuing to talk about it, put your attention on it, to keep it going, to have more of your day be wonderful like that feels. Because I think in a previous podcast, you gave an example of someone being in maybe a lower state or a negative emotion that makes someone, but has someone feel down or irritated or something that they don't desire. And then they keep feeling that, and they're adding momentum or attention to that. Yeah. And then it feels like, or it is like, or they perceive it like more things are going bad. And it just it confirms that feeling inside, and it just snowballs. It snowballs until it gets so bad that the person has to stop or go to bed. Like something has to stop it. Or you're saying you're saying that as soon as you feel something like that, even like the really subtle beginnings of like a bad mood, if I could just wrap them all up like in that term, at the very beginning that something like that might happen. Oh, you called it resistance, like resisting what could be the flowing state you could be in all the time. Bringing your I think you said you could meditate or stop or just bring your attention onto anything else other than that. Maybe like a neutral thing or something that feels better, and then start to change the momentum. I think that's what you were saying. So the snowball stops, and then you can start to, like, it might feel like you're pushing the snowball back up, or maybe not even that, just leave it alone and then start.
At the broadest level, at the highest level, when you're on the other side of these experiences, it's so easy to see them and in your own practice know and change, transmute, do these things that are so simple. It's the process, the practice. If you don't have a practice, you're always going to be at the whim of the external. And it's not even that much work. And we were saying this just before we started recording. And you said this last time, too. It seems so simple. It's so simple. Like, I could say it's so simple, and it is. But when you're not allocating time, you're going to get caught up in what is happening. You made a comment last time about how you get caught up in more powerful consciousness if you're not connecting with your own.
I don't know. I might have revised that since then.
Because when you said that was the one.
Can continue.
What I would say is you can't. There's not a power to the consciousness that like can manipulate others. It seems that way at lower states. And I think this is all coming together. Perhaps maybe that's why I'm bringing this, and this I'm not really even completing a thought yet, but it'll all wrap together here shortly. But there's not a power in consciousness that manipulates others because it's coming from the highest source in which it benefits whomever is attached to it. However, most people observe these things through like media or stories or movies in the past where it seems like people can wield control over others. Those are all low states of consciousness. But really, when you're coming from that place of connectedness where you are connected with self and you are creating from that place that is intended to be, even if others are coming from lower states of consciousness to contribute to that, it's still part of what they are desiring, even if they're not fully aware to what degree in which that's going to manifest. But it's not like you're using people. You know, people can't be used. To revert to what I was originally saying is that it's so simple to connect with it. And the subtle states that I always talk about is if something is happening that you just give literally a smidgen of attention to, and you're aware of how it feels, right there is that shift. And you recognize that's not truth. That's not truth, because I know how it feels because I've done this enough to know what that means. But that's the momentum that then people give attention to, even if it's 5 minutes. That 5 minutes is so powerful. Mm-hmm. That 5 minutes will change the whole day. But that's why if you just to give yourself 10 to 20 minutes a day and you are aware of those things and you continue to practice that, these subtle experiences where you can literally be guided physically, movement as you're walking around to places that you're wanting to go, you can't ever know that impulse unless you're happening to catch a big whiff of your source in some moment randomly. But you could do that all day, every day. And for me, that's what I love to talk about, because those are so powerful and magical. And it goes back to what you're saying about your birthday and the celebration, how those things were coming, because you had set that tone and you were just in flow with all of those experiences that were to come in. But that is every day. That is every day. And I love getting people to see that, even if just for a couple of days. But for me too, it's about, as we talk about these things more and more, people hear it different every single time. And also as we share personal stories like your birthday, but then also creating and cultivating a community of people that are aware of this and practicing this and spreading it with others is really important for me too. And that's kind of related to what I was talking about in the beginning about this new year and all the things that we've been creating and seeing the evidence of those things.
I want to go back to that comment about if you don't accept that you have any control over your life, then you'll be moved. And the way I said it last time, I don't feel like it really conveyed what I meant, because I agreed that there isn't any assertion. There isn't like a controlling, manipulative. I don't believe that at all, like power that's moving you around. Mm-hmm. But I do feel like if that conscious awareness and accountability for self isn't there, then someone will just continue to be moved by their subconscious processing or their programming. So in a sense, they're just being moved in a more like sleeper state, and they don't have this like awareness that they're doing it. Yeah, it's more like you're being influenced and reacting to the outer world instead of having this awareness that you can influence from inside your outer world.
Yes.
So that's more of what I was wanting to convey.
Yeah.
Because I don't like and I don't accept that idea that there's something that can influence me without my consent. And that's all for me. I agree. It's all one. It's all the same. It's all the same self. I mean, there's nothing different about my consciousness from your consciousness. Mm-hmm. Like the feeling of being here and existing, like at the most core level. I have a name and things I do and where I live, but all that is just like a story. I could have been born anywhere. I can name myself anything. Mm-hmm. So, and I know the conscious and subconscious mind is an idea. Like I said a few podcasts ago, we don't necessarily have to cut it up into pieces.
Yeah.
But I do feel now that I'm more here that there's this like awake state.
Yeah.
And then there's more of like an asleep state. And the difference being asleep, you don't feel like you have any control or any influence. And then you manifest that. You keep creating that because that's what you think. And this actually reminds me of something Abraham Hicks had said about people who don't believe in the law of attraction, that they continue, they're right for them because they keep creating that.
Yeah.
And I liked that as an idea, like, because it doesn't go against anything that they have said.
Yeah.
What you continue to believe really strongly, like the mind is so strong, you will continue to see that and you'll be right. So why not experiment with a different way? Anyhow, I also liked what you said about the practice, like the importance of practice, even if it's just a few minutes, again, because it's always now. And I love how it doesn't necessarily, like the length of the practice doesn't necessarily trump like the depth of the practice. Like you can do a lot in a short period of time by tuning into your own self and feeling how you're doing and just really shift quickly. But I liked how you emphasized that because it makes sense. Those people that want to do something different on New Year's and then they have this momentum, this decision that's kind of smeared on top of their old habits that last for maybe a day or a week or I don't know. But you're right. Like they need to, if they're going to change their state of being that matches up with whatever they want, that's going to take perhaps some practice and shifting of their state to stay there, to make it feel more normal.
Yeah.
Or natural.
Yeah.
However, you did say, I think in the last podcast, that it is possible to just like shift quickly from one state. But I think it does take some practice to show yourself that. Yeah. And I'll give my personal example of what happened yesterday, and then I'll stop there. About the shifting of states. So I was recording our yoga classes yesterday, and I had wanted to finish them at a certain time. And then I had something else to do later in the day. And I was trying to stick to these deadlines I had set for myself. And things were happening and I wasn't able to get things done on that timeline. And I was starting to feel stressed about it. And then other people wanted things from me and wanted me to come over. And I felt more and more stressed and a little bit irritated. But because of what we've talked about and because of what I know, on the way over to meet someone, I felt this irritation in the car and I stopped it. And all I really did was notice it. And then I said, no, I'm choosing to feel this. I'm choosing to feel irritated and I don't want that. So let's look at this a different way. Like, hey, I really want to go see this person. And hey, there's more time in the day. I'll go record the classes later. Mm-hmm. And I released this rigidness that I had about my day and allowed things to unfold more naturally, I guess I could say, or I was flowing. And I felt better. I felt a lot better. And there was someone in the group I was going to meet who apparently was like irritated or mad. And I got a text like, maybe you don't come over because there's like arguments happening. And I just felt this truth of the reflection in me. I was like, okay, I feel really irritated. Apparently this person's irritated. And then as I took charge of how I felt in the car and changed the trajectory of my thoughts and like the snowball in a different direction, I got a text like, I don't know, maybe 5 minutes later that, oh no, never mind. Like everything's good here. Like it seems better now. And it was fine when I showed up. Like no one was irritated. It was great. And it was like this very quick reflection for me about what I do inside, how what I do inside reflects.
Yes.
And that was like a very on the nose reflection on the outside. And that was something I shared with you yesterday. And that was part of that conversation. Like, how can we help people know this more? Yeah. How can we help people play with this more? Because that's something that you've mentioned to me a couple times, that it seems like not a lot of people know that.
Yeah.
And like, what is that process to helping people get there?
Yeah.
Because it made my day better. And I did it.
There was nothing that did that but you. Nothing. And then the evidence of what you did was apparent. The thing I was wanting to say as you were sharing that story, and I love it so much, is that some people might hear that story and think, oh, that's all coincidental at the lowest level of awareness, perhaps. But then even on different layers of that, some people might think, well, how much influence and how? And then they start trying to logically perhaps understand that. And for me, that's how I was as I was coming into this awareness. But I wasn't listening to anybody. I wasn't listening to Abraham at the time. I wasn't reading books. I was just meditating all the time. And I just kept showing myself because I wanted truth. All I cared was, I want truth. I want to know what's truth about this experience. And I kept showing myself these things. And that's why I said when I came into other teachers, I saw that they were all sharing the same thing from their level of awareness, which is what I keep saying, that someone could go and sit for years by themselves and meditate and do things that people would not believe. I know that. I was actually considering doing that until I realized I wanted to have a more human experience. There is contrast with our experiences with humans. That's where most our contrast comes from.
Contrast being like a resistant, or it feels like something's going wrong, just to like define that more.
Yeah. And that is a word that I did take from Abraham because it is so poignant, essentially, because it's so descriptive of not just the experience, but also analogous to, say, photography. Without contrast, there's nothing to see in an image. There's nothing to hear. The contrast of vibration and audible noises, all of those things are contrasting. And so the same thing for the experience. And so that's why I use that word, and I probably will forevermore. I can't think of a better one. But that's where the contrast comes from, because that's where the consciousness is playing with itself to understand itself, that we all are, that we refer to as God or source or universe or whatever. And in those experiences and expressions with each other, we develop more awareness with ourselves and the collective, and therefore move more in the direction that we are wanting for greater harmony. That's why people don't realize that what we do within is emanating in the field around us. It does. But not just that. Even if you don't want to consider that as truth, then as you did that, we can use this as an example. If you were to show up and she was still there, because you had already done that within you, you could say it as like practiced it, like as if you were doing yoga before you, or just stretching before you go and run. That's kind of the same thing. You could look at it that way. So if you did show up in that experience and that person was still that way, it wouldn't affect you. And if anything, you would be prepared for that to then allow that person to be influenced by where you were at energetically. So there's two things that are happening there I want to remark on. And this is where people just have to experience it for themselves, that you can actually shift, and other people that don't even have to be in proximity to you will do the same. But then even if they don't, they will in proximity because of the power of in which you are flowing your energy from. And it's interesting because you mentioned to me quantum entanglement yesterday.
I'm literally looking that up as we speak because I was like, this fits in somehow.
Yeah, of course it does. And so that is a scientific way in which people can try to logically look at that and then try to understand how that works, which I don't use science anymore because it's so limiting. Not that there's anything wrong with it, because it does provide a great bit of value for a lot of things, especially in this modern world and the way in which we have currently created the world.
Well, I think the quantum realm definitely helps those more physically minded
for sure
question things. So
for sure, which is why I say there's
continue,
nothing.
Please.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with utilizing the scientific aspect of things, but periodically that's why I do bring them into conversation.
And it's like a real thing. That the quantum entanglement, it's a real thing.
Yeah. And so that is a way for people to kind of understand that haven't had the ability to have these experiences yet, because that's how I was. If I was listening to this conversation 15 years ago, I would not hear anything except for the quantum entanglement aspect of it. And then that might allow me to bridge the understanding. So I understand that, absolutely. But that's why I always go back to explaining my experiences and the practice and how it can only be experienced by the self, and that no words. I could sit here, meditate for an hour before we got on this, and then just start speaking what was coming through me, and it could resonate with a million people in a million different ways. But that's just the resonance that then they have to then bridge themselves, like I always say. And these conversations are always just doing that in a myriad of ways. So I completely understand all of that. But the beautiful aspect of all this, the reason I love these conversations and what I share and what I express more than anything is because I've seen the potential too. And what is to manifest physically in reality, because it's eternal. It's never ending. But what that ends up becoming is so amazing. It's already amazing, but it's always getting more amazing and if you've just had a glimpse of that, there's no way you could ever be caught in any negative spiral, because you can't unknow that. And that's why when people use plant medicines or things that are really potent and they see these higher realms and all this other stuff and they just want to go back there, I'm like, well, you're physically here for a reason. But I'm mentioning that because if you can see it without anything, just within yourself, and I'm not talking about just practicing just to stay aligned, just to have, the best day that you can every day, but there is this deeper aspect too, where you can actually explore consciousness, the universal consciousness, without anything but just sitting with self. And a lot of teachers don't talk about this. Even Abraham always talks about like, well, you should just meditate, 20 minutes a day is good enough. But there is much more that can be experienced in meditation. And I know you know this too. And so there is this play with it too, where you can have these experiences where you can see things and witness things that give yourself clarity that is fun, that may not be and pertain to your physical life in that moment. But then because you have these experiences and because you have these things that are pertinent to you, it shifts you because you can't unknow that experience that is so potent without having to use anything.
Right. See, that's why I really liked Neville Goddard's material, because he went into a lot of detail about how he used his imagination. And basically that's, your focus to influence his inner state, which then was reflected in his outer state. And he has this lecture or a book called The Pearl of Great Price. And I think he got that from the Bible. I think that the Pearl of Great Price is in there, that phrase. And essentially it's this message of, well, you're accepting that you create your reality and the power of your mind, your focus, your consciousness, your imagination. Like you can accept that a little bit, or you can go all in and accept that all the way and really test this to the degree that you want. And he called that buying the pearl. Like you'd have to experiment with that, really let go of giving your power to other things. Mm-hmm. Like your astrology, the zodiac signs, the crystals, the whatever. And I know that's like a lot, but that practicing to that extent, like really putting all the power in your own self and in your own mind, and practicing that in meditation is a way to really, really, like really show yourself without. And I was calling it waffling earlier. Like I would find myself giving my power away still to other things. And it's like a process. Like these things we're talking about are, not simple. Well, maybe they're simple, but not necessarily easy. Mm-hmm. And that was what I decided during this new year. I was like, no, because you know what? I had someone Instagram message me, this sweet girl I've been talking to all year. And everyone's messengers. And she just sent me a message at just the perfect time. And she said, Odette, remember the pearl of great price. Just like a random message. I hadn't heard from her in months. Mm-hmm. She said, Odette, remember the pearl. And just a couple other things. And I know that seems like maybe a little bit out there. But anyway, I'm at that point where I'm ready to like really test everything like that to that degree, while still staying grounded, like still being,
for sure,
I'm aware of what's happening outside of me. I'm aware of what the scientific community believes and thinks and where everyone is. Like I'm in that field. Yeah, that was one thing that I did get from Neville that I didn't get from Abraham, but I really like how she's able to teach more generally and reach people. And I was able to hear what she said at first. I would not have been able to hear what Neville said. I would have thought he was insane. Yeah. And I also wasn't interested in the Bible or all those stories. Yeah. But yeah, that like sitting in meditation, you have an imagination like no other animal, as far as we know, has that. Like really sit down. All it takes is a few minutes and quiet the mind and start playing with it. And I wanted to come back for a second to something you said that I really liked about finding the truth. Like you really, and I think that desire really brings you to this place. Like, what is the truth? And you keep looking for truth outside. And is there truth in this and that? Yeah. But invariably, things outside, at least of me, in my experience, have not let me down, but haven't always been what I consider true or reliable, like all the time. And the more I practiced meditating and playing with my thoughts and really directing my thoughts, the more I could see like this definite pattern. And like when I was irritated in the car, that was true for me at that moment. Yeah. Like I was, but I was able to change it and feel thankful and excited to go see these people. And then that was my truth. And like the people who don't believe in the power of their mind or law of attraction, and they keep seeing that, like that's their truth. But then there's other people who really do believe in things like that, and it's true for them. So really like the common denominator is you. Yeah. And in my opinion, like the truth, I feel like what we're saying is the truth is you. Yes.
There's a few things, if I may speak. I don't know if you're finished. I would love to let you continue. I am. Okay. Sometimes there's so much that it's like, where do I go?
I know. I think we're doing great though.
Okay. I just want to take a deep breath.
I love it. It helps me too when I hear people breathe like that. Yeah.
It's funny because when I used to record, I'm actually recording meditations, digression a little bit here for a moment, but when I used to record meditations for people, I would breathe in it. And then, in between what I was speaking so that you could hear my breath. And then I started doing breath overlay where I'd breathe first, like do a 20-minute meditation while breathing intentionally into the microphone and then recording separately. And that way they could follow along with the breath as well.
I know I did say a lot of things there. But I'm interested in, I talked about the pearl and then Abraham and Neville and then the truth.
I'm doing this by sharing the personal aspects that I don't normally do, but I feel like it grounds it. And you talk about grounding. So for me, it was about truth because, and we've talked about this many times, how there was all this fluctuation in my life experience. And then I just thought there's got to be some consistency to this. This isn't just random. And that's why that whole year occurred. And for me, it was, when I first started to experience what that truth was, it was all me. And it was overwhelming because I was doing so much in such a short period of time. Whereas I don't imagine 99% of people would do what I did because their life experience will likely not create that desire. As I always talk about, it's the life experience that creates any desire. Always. And my life experience was so intense, was also then therefore creating an intense experience for that clarity. And so it was really, and I have not actually ever shared this probably, but it was a lot because I was seeing so much every day. There was this aspect of, wow, there's so much power here because it is all me. And I kept seeing that every day, more and more and more for weeks and months and months. But I also could feel the truth. I could feel it because it felt like, and this is something I thought about this morning too, as I was in meditation, like what is truth? And this is kind of blending some things together. And what is love? What is the heart? What is the brain? What is the body? What are all these energy centers in the body? What are all these things? And how do we define these things without having to read about them or someone tell us what they are? But if you simplify it and you know what fear is, and then you also know what home feels like or love feels like. And we talked about this previously too. And even in Sedona, how can you simplify it to say, is this love or is this fear? And that is a duality aspect of things. And you can simplify it that way. And then if you are applying that and overlying that to everything that you're doing within, and then also externally, then you can start to find and deprogram, decondition, untangle what is truth, because you know what it feels like from those two aspects. And fear is the external. It is the conditioning. It is the experience. That is the unknown. But when you are reverting back to what feels like love, what feels like home, what feels like that's truth, that's truth. And that's coming from the heart. People know what that feels like. And if you want to go back into scientific terms, we know that there's a field from the heart. We know how big that radiates. We know how to measure that. And so if someone was to say, well, I want to find my own truth, how do I do that? Well, sure, meditation is great, and all the ways in which we've described the process, the tools through ourselves and others, that's all great. But if you really just want to sit with it and you learn how to get past those initial stages that we've talked about in previous ones as well, how to quiet the mind, how to, be with yourself for whatever duration of time. And this goes back into the more esoteric stuff about giving yourself more than just 20 minutes, just attuned for the day. Then give it 30 minutes, 45 minutes, an hour, and things will start happening like what I've talked about in previous episodes of my own personal experiences. And this is why yoga is also a great tool for this, because if you're just sitting, it is, especially if you've not done a lot of yoga, it is hard to sit in lotus, or it is hard just to sit comfortably. But if you're getting yourself into a position, and this is why my practice was so potent, where you are holding a pose, but I'm not saying a pose like King Dancer. I'm saying a pose like fold or something that's more like what would traditionally be called restorative yoga. Then it gives you a little bit of a focus that's soft, where you're having to focus because it's not completely comfortable, but you're kind of falling into it by releasing through the breath. So, for example, something might be like, and I've talked about this many times, child's pose, and this is all related. And you sit in child's pose, and for some people that might be really uncomfortable, and some people it might be extremely comfortable, and some people it might be somewhere in between. But if it's somewhere in between and there's just a slight discomfort because there's a little bit of tightness in the hips or in the knees or in the back somewhere, but it's not so uncomfortable that you couldn't sit there for 20 minutes or even 30 or an hour, but you then start to use your breath to connect with that and then to release those things in the body. And then what you're doing is you're allowing that sensation to give you some kind of focus. And this is before just sitting just sitting to meditate for an hour or whatever it may be. But it's just enough to keep you softly focused physically. And then as you breathe, you're giving yourself two things to have focus on. and that is the breath and the body. And then you can start to, the more you stay there, you'll start receiving things. You will start to have things come in. And this is where I've not talked about this before. This is where I talk about the deconditioning or deprogramming for some people, where you don't have to do yoga for years and years to do this, but you'll start to have things come in, and you can tune back to that place within you using those tools, the breath and the body, and then start to feel as things come in. And this is where trauma might be referred to, or old pain from decades ago, or childhood stuff, or whatever. And then you start to transmute it by, as it comes up and you feel that sensation, that emotion, or whatever it is, bringing it back to the breath and the body. So it comes in, you feel it, you bring it into back where you were, and then you stay focused there, and then it'll shift. And then you'll start seeing the truth of it. You'll start seeing what it is. I don't want to go too specific here, because if I do, then people will start trying to attach that specificity and then try to make that be what it is that they're looking for. But it's unique to every single perspective. That's why I won't do that. But this, to me, is the best tool for this, what I'm describing here. And so then that transmutation becomes clarity. It's not something that's just lingering in the subconscious for the entire duration of life, or even the physical body. And then you do that over and over again, and you start to see how all those things were what you were asking for that clarity that it is now then giving to you in the moment. So that's the stage in which people are healing or transmuting or shifting, or, karma to dharma, or whatever. And then after that, you start to see these things that are esoteric, that if it wasn't for those experiences, you couldn't then have found a way to explore. So if those experiences didn't happen, which then prompted the desire to heal them, which created the processes to go within, you wouldn't be able then to go within to then have those experiences that allow you then to actually shift your reality, and then therefore the collective.
I love that. I love everything you just said so much. And I feel like what you're talking about, that practice of allowing things to come up and being with them, and how those experiences may have sparked a desire in you to know yourself better, or to know your own power, that's it. Like that there is some reason for it, right? It's not like a punishment like you did anything wrong, but there's actually a way to use all of like the gamut of your experiences to actually know yourself and know your own power and come to your own truth on your own. And I'm very excited about your future meditations, because I feel like that is such a great practice for doing exactly what you're talking about, which is all this inner work. I know of a practice called Yoga Nidra, and I don't know if you do that or you like teaching that, but there's a part in this like really in-depth step-by-step Yoga Nidra. Nidra means sleep. So yogic sleep. You're not actually sleeping, but like just resting or relaxing or against the wall, or there's a step in Yoga Nidra where you find a sensation. So maybe like stretch or something uncomfortable, like a pain, and then a part of the body that doesn't feel like that. And then shifting your awareness back and forth and feeling how you can do that, how you can hold both of them at the same time. And then there's also another part where you do that with emotions on purpose. And there's a whole bunch of different iterations of that practice. There's like trauma sensitive ones, and there's eye rest, and then there's rain meditations and the Ho'oponopono. There's so many, but I like what you're saying, like allowing whatever it is that's there to come up and you feel it. The only thing that I remembered being added to that in the Yoga Nidra practice was having an emotion like love come up or happiness, and then intentionally bringing up something that feels opposite of that, and just noticing the everything, the effects that has in your body and how you are doing it. You can shift your attention back and forth to release that energy and transmute it. I think you said, I know that is a process. Like, I remember in the yoga therapy program, we were playing with that Ho'oponopono or loving kindness meditation, like the Hawaiian meditation, which is so beautiful. It's like 4 lines. That's all it is. It's like, I love you. I'm sorry. Please forgive me. Thank you. Over and over and over and over and over and over again. And we were led through this practice where we were thinking these lines, or we would just repeat them silently in our mind. And we brought someone into mind that we loved and cared about us. And then the teacher would have us bring someone else in, someone who we hadn't seen in a long time, in our mind, in our imagination, and saying these things like to them, I love you. I'm sorry. Please forgive me. Thank you. And then someone finally that we had a challenge with. And I remember like not being able to do that. I remember, and this was like not so long ago, just a few years ago. I really had a hard time like with that forgiveness, and now I know, for me anyway, and I'd love your input on this. In meditation, when stuff like that comes up, like fear or sadness or whatever it was, the hurt, the forgiveness really does help me, and seeing it as part of me. Like in my dream I described last time of this person chasing me, and I was afraid, and then I finally looked at them and just saw them as part of myself. The forgiveness and seeing everything as me really helps me to move stuff, because that was what was blocking, I think, before. I wouldn't see the hurt as being mine. It was like something that happened to me and I wouldn't forgive it. And that's basically that. But I'm excited about your meditations. There's a lot of different ones out there. And my own practice has been a long journey, and the forgiveness, just that simple, and the mirror, like everything is you. We're really the final pieces. So I'll leave it there, and I'd love your thoughts on what I just said.
That. And it's funny, you said you brought up all that. When you mentioned Yoga Nidra, I felt some energy come through me. But, I told you that I'm familiar with all these different lineages and philosophies and ideas, but I don't delve into them unless they are coming to my experience. Like I don't go and search for them. But if they come into my experience and I know there's a reason, and it's okay, well, I can find the truth in that irrelevancy. And so I'm familiar with Yoga Nidra, and I've recorded people that do Yoga Nidra, but I don't, and like I said, unless it's right there. And so all your descriptions I wasn't familiar to that degree, but it's the same thing that I was talking about. And I want to kind of revert for just a second. That was my explanation of truth and my own truth, and therefore how anyone can find their own truth. So wanted to make that kind of preface once again. So Yoga Nidra and those processes that you were describing, and even the Hawaiian, it's funny that you just we're doing this Kauai stuff, and I'm making and it's just, and Hawaii is one of my favorite places. But the forgiveness thing. So the aspects of all those that I like and dislike, and I don't dislike them, it's just kind of a longer way to go to the place that can be achieved. And what's so funny, and what always comes back to me, and what I always think about is I've mentioned this before, everything I've ever done, I always do it and then create the most efficient path for subsequent people to do the same, whether it be professional, personal, anything. Everything I ever do, I always make everything more efficient. We're all really doing that, but I've always done that to an extreme degree. That was just part of my beingness. And even with all this stuff. And so those tools and practices are doing the same thing, but you shouldn't go and intentionally summon something, but allow it to come in, because it may not be relevant yet, or it might be premature, or it may not even be necessary, but all it's really doing is just showing you how to retune, kind of like when you're saying you're intentionally bringing up something, or you're intentionally bringing up the emotion or the thing in the body or a person. And for me, that's why when I described what I just did about how I started, and that's just an example using like child's pose. And the reason I'd like child's pose is because anyone can find sensation in child's pose. You can always, unless you have no bones, you can find sensation in child's pose. It doesn't matter how flexible you are. And it's a very passive pose, but you can find sensation. When you can find that sensation, you can then find some resistance. There's always some resistance in the body. It doesn't matter how flexible and amazing you get, there's something there.
Well, thank goodness, because you just fall apart otherwise.
Exactly. The reason I say that is because if you can use that as a simple foundation, you're going to then have those things come up, and you don't have to like go and search for it. Just, and here's why. If you're going to search for it, you may just be activating it. And sure, then you have a process that you're going into with intention to then try to transmute it, but you may not then. And you might activate it and then not transmute it. But if you're going to, let's just say, we'll just make this the default child's pose. And I use this a lot. And so let's just say, well, I'm just going to go connect. I'm not going to sit meditation, but I'm going to get in child's pose. And this is what I do every single morning. This is what I do every single morning for years in bed. As soon as I wake up, I flip into child's pose and I do this. And this is how I do my breathing. And so then I'm breathing into that, and those things will start coming up naturally. But because I'm in that position and I'm already connected to breath, it's so easy to either reconnect to my breath or reconnect to the sensation that I'm moving through. And then whatever is transmuted from that, I'm experiencing so fast, as opposed to having to go out and search and destroy.
Right. That makes so much sense.
So and then if you're doing that every single morning, you're not just tuning, you're constantly transmuting the experiences you were having that you were doing for other people, perhaps. Here's an example. Like, I've spent more time with my family in the last year than I have in many years. And there is energy that you are receiving when you're around people. It's super subtle. But for me, I'm aware of it. I'm aware of every single bit of energy that I am receiving from every single experience I have. And so for me, it takes me like maybe 2 to 5 seconds to transmute that if I'm around a lot of different people and different people's energy. But if I didn't do that, those things would accumulate over time, over long periods of time. And then I might have to spend a good amount of time doing something at some point and searching and destroying that in some way. But that goes back to what you were talking about with the person that you were going to meet, that then before you met was actually in a different state. But if you would have been there, you would have received some of that.
It would have added to the momentum that I had going in my mood.
Even if you had shifted and that person hadn't shifted yet before you got there,
I see.
You would have still picked up on some of that, but not a lot, because your momentum would have moved her versus that person's momentum moving you, because you're coming from that higher state, but you still would have had some. And so there would have been a little bit remnant on that later on. It would have been a thought that you had, or you'd even thought about that person in a way like you experienced that person had, or even a comment that person said. And anyone can probably understand this. If you're around somebody, even if they're in a bad mood for 10 seconds and they make a comment, you might think about that comment later on in the day. And that's part of that. That's part of that energy that I'm talking about. So that comment comes back up in your consciousness in some way. But because you had done that work before you even met that person, that none of that even happened. But I'm giving an example of how comments and words are energy and therefore become part of our consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
And so if we give attention to it in our own consciousness, it then adds that to ourselves. But that's all related in that if you're using these tools, and I talked about it in a very expansive way, how that can be a way in which somebody finds truth, and people can do that through yoga too over years and going through different asanas and different, all of these different lineages. But there is a super simple way. If someone's ever done yoga or never meditated, and that's what I was just describing, and then find their own truth and then discover that they created and attracted everything to know what they know now, to then become who they were supposed to be, and then intentionally moving through their life experience, all of that stuff. But it doesn't have to be complicated, and it doesn't have to be years, and it doesn't have to be months. It can be now. Mm-hmm. And that to me is what I'm always doing, giving people the most efficient, effective way to do it now and not feel like they have to go through this whole rigmarole to do that. And for me, child's pose or laying on the back or a hard surface on the floor, and there's other restorative poses I like to use too, is the best way to do that.
I liked how you said intentionally bringing things up in the moment may not be the right time, or you may not be receptive to working through whatever that is. Although in my training as a yoga therapist, we were taught all these practices that people could show up for sessions for. And that is the way a lot of therapy sessions work. I think in general, you come up and it's like just whenever you schedule it. And I guess we'll talk about this now. And, but it almost makes me, it brings me back to what we said about following the flow. And if you get an impulse, do it then.
Yeah.
And don't wait, because I mean, it's not like it'll just not work at all. But when you get the impulse to do something, or you have energy to do something, you'll probably do it a lot more efficiently, or the other person or you may be more receptive. With my experience, I mean, I wasn't ready to process what we were being asked to. Well, I mean, I wasn't being asked to do anything in particular, but with the loving kindness, Ho'oponopono meditation, and bringing someone to mind that I had problems with, and I really wasn't practicing what we're talking about much at that time, although I was definitely asking inside.
Yeah.
I wasn't ready. I wasn't ready to release that yet. And my ego was still, hurt and like was pushing back. So it wouldn't have mattered how many times I did that. Or maybe it did. Like maybe each time, like the walls came down a little bit more. But I did so much inner, what's the word? Growth. I progressed so much this year. I meditated so much this year, and I didn't have to do that thing. I didn't have to bring up in this stepwise way, like this emotion and then that emotion, or this sensation or that sensation. Yeah. Although I can see how that process can be helpful for working with someone. Like you have to do something. For sure. If someone shows up and it's not conversational, but yeah, it's really more like moving energy, like you've described so many times. But this year I did these meditation practices and I really made it my own. And yeah, I had these really, I would say, intense and profound experiences where it felt like that idea of the ego wasn't so much there. Like that wall of the ego between me and other people wasn't there. And using my reality and other people as mirrors was something I'd already had in my mind for a couple months, since like the middle of this year. So something happened in like a series of meditations I had that really like that forgiveness of everything just naturally happened. Yeah. And it felt like I wasn't doing it in little pieces. It all just came up, and wow, I don't even know really what happened, but yeah, it was like the ego. I didn't have to get through that wall, and then everything kind of flooded in at once. And it was almost like all that energy was there for me to process. Like you're saying, I didn't summon it. It came through me. Yeah. And I would try to go about my day, and I would feel things so strongly that like about these people that maybe I had issues with, or even people I don't. And I just felt so much care and compassion and forgiveness. And sometimes I would just have to stop whatever I was doing and sit and meditate some more. Yeah. And if there was something there, like a little poke inside, like, and I'm like, what is that? I don't feel comfortable. What is that? I would sit down and it would just flow, and I didn't have to really do anything. Yeah. So I felt like, yeah, I didn't really have to do anything. I did do something for somehow, some way I successfully like made this ego dragon into like a little puppy. And I was able to then see everything as really like truly a mirror. Yeah. When the ego's up, I couldn't really see anything beyond it. It's like it's this self-preservation, defending me, all about me and it. But then somehow I was able to look beyond that and all that forgiveness and everything I, needed to process. Not everything. There still are some things. It just naturally flowed. It just flowed out. Yeah. And it was intense, but yeah, it's like I think you said something yesterday about pinching yourself off. Like you feel this resistance, or you're not happy about something and you could be flowing, but you're not. And whether or not that's a choice, it's like pinching yourself off from the flow that you could be in. Mm-hmm. But then you said something I really liked about how even if you do that, when you finally let go or something happens and you release that, you're going to just slingshot forward or catapult forward into what you desire. Yeah. And I really liked how you described that, yesterday, because it's like, you really can't mess it up. You can't mess up your life, or you can't, well, I don't know if I want to say it that way, but you can't like what you really want. You're going in that direction anyway, but you don't have to pinch yourself off if you can be aware and slingshot forward or something. And that definitely happened to me this year. And it was intense. Yeah. And remember how in the first podcast, I said there was like a long time where I was the same person.
Yep.
And not a lot was happening. But things were kind of like little seeds were being planted, but not a lot of inner growth happened. I was in more of like a sleeper state.
Yeah.
And then within like a very short period of time, definitely since finding Neville, the last couple of years, and especially this year, it's just like I was slingshotted so far. Yeah. I'm not in 2020. I'm not in 2022. I'm way out there somewhere. Yeah. Oh my God.
The one thing I want to remark on is that's why there's nothing wrong with any of those processes. They meet people where they're at. It's just that if anyone's hearing anything I'm saying, it is a bridge to give somebody an opportunity to go somewhere faster that they're asking to go to. If anyone hears this, they're ready to hear it in some way. But if it doesn't resonate with them, that's okay. It was a seed. It's been planted. I've been planting seeds for years, thousands, millions. We all are. We all are. But, your expression of your experience of the things that I talk about too also gives some kind of relative experience of that. And this goes back to the visual aspect of the things that I've received. And this whole podcast has been amazing for a lot of reasons, because it kind of encompasses a lot of different things that we've talked about in the past. Mm-hmm. But it talks about how to find your own truth. It talks about how to go deeper than just tuning and having esoteric experiences that are personal and that may be translated for others, how to find your own power, how to find your own kind of divine gifts. Like all of these things is kind of what we're going into here. And then also explaining then what mine are and what I've done, and then how that relates to universal truth and not just my own truth, and then everyone else, and how that plays in harmony with everything. And I talk about visions that I receive, and what you're talking about and what I share. Here's a perfect example. Like all the stuff that we've been talking about just in this one in particular, I had these visions about this stuff a long time ago. And when I first started to receive these visions, I didn't know what they were. But it's, and I've described it in the past episodes a couple of times, how when you see them, they're not visual visions, like from like the third dimensional kind of experience, like as if it's not something I could see in real life, because it's not 3-dimensional. It's not 2-dimensional. And we talk about,
so it's not like a dream. If people dream and see things, it's not. Okay.
Yeah. It's not like an object. It's not like, it's so hard to describe because there's no way from the physical reality that we're currently in to describe it, so it's hard to describe it. But the best way, and I've tried to in the past, is I think I mentioned last time, that's kind of geometric sometimes. And it's almost like, here's the best way to describe it. This is a new way. It's like seeing maybe something geometric and seeing it in time, like moving. But instead of seeing those two things as separate, you're seeing it as a whole, not in time. So it's like seeing movement and patterns, but they're not in motion in time. It's like a whole thing at once. That's the only way that it can be described in any way that might make sense. But what happened,
I have an image of like a kaleidoscope, but yeah, but that's moving.
That's kind of maybe like a torus, like being inside of a torus is kind of like maybe an example of that. Like if you think about like the donut shape, like a torus.
Yeah. It's like an infinite shape too.
And like being
there's like
it,
movement there, but not. Okay, that makes sense.
But you can. But anyway, so when these happen, it's a feeling. The sensation of it is so potent, and it gives me this understanding that I translate into words in my experience. And the reason I'm sharing this is because all these things that we've been talking about in this podcast came from, say, one that I had a while back, like a year and a half ago. And all these relationships I started to develop, it was all coming through. And I thought, oh, that's what that was. And it's amazing for me because it's this unfolding of an experience that I had for just a moment, in a meditation that lasts for weeks and months and years. And there's nothing that, like I said in the last one, there's no way that I could receive it any more clearly than that. It kind of reminds me of that movie as I was just describing it, that movie that came out in the last 5 years is probably one of the last movies I saw where these aliens came to the planet and they're trying to communicate with them, but they're communicating with like shapes and they're trying to decipher. I don't know if you saw this movie.
No, I don't think I did.
They're like trying to decipher their language. They can't understand because they're thinking of it in like a linear way. But anyway, so it's kind of like that almost now that I think about it. And I'll look this up and send it to you later and maybe make a comment about it next podcast. But what's so compelling about it for me is there's no way that anyone or anything could express so much information or energy in any other way than that. And when we talk about these things and you share your experiences with them, it adds more to those things, like this conversation. And when you talk about how you had to go through these processes, like, well, I had to, you did some of this stuff, like you and Nidra and the Hawaiian stuff and all that. But then you see how much faster you move when you're not necessarily using other people's processes, but how you're going with who you were supposed to be or intended to be. And you're then developing it within yourself. And then it feels like a slingshot. And so for me, what I'm really wrapping this up with, I saw that in a vision that we're all part of this field that is moving outward. And when we pinch ourselves off or resist, it looks like kind of a slowdown, but your potential is still always moving, or your source is still always moving. And so when you let go of that resistance, it can be a process, like from the physical. It's like, okay, well, I'm doing this process and this process. And from the physical time, space, reality, that might be a day or a week or a month or a year or even a couple. But then when you do, the momentum is moving so much faster and you're catching back up with where that field was moving. And that's why I always say you can't mess anything up. You can't. You just cause resistance, or you just create resistance. And if people can just get a glimpse of that in their own experience, it takes this edge off that you never have to have again, because you realize nothing can ever be wrong. It just changes your reality in such an extreme way. And then if you have a glimpse of it in your own experience, like you're talking about, then you know it and it can never be unknown. And it's just it creates this peace that just is unrivaled. There's nothing else that can create a peace like that until you find it within you. And these words and the way in which I'm describing it from my own personal experience, and how I've taught it with others and how you've experienced it and how it all relates, it gives other people this ability to resonate with that and then want to find it and then stimulate the desire that they were asking for anyways to try to find that within themselves.
Wow. I love that.
This is the most beautiful thing.
I was thinking about, well, like, to describe a little bit more of the pinching off and using my own personal example, when I was in the car I was feeling more stressed, but it became like an irritation, not at anyone in particular, just because I wanted to like meet these deadlines, but like pinching off. I think Abraham describes it as like any negative feeling. Anytime you don't feel as great as you could, there's some resistance there. And I knew I was choosing that. I knew I was choosing to feel that way. And I even described it to you like I felt edgy. And like sometimes I feel like I have this edge, and it comes from this self-imposed stress about doing this now or doing this here. And once I let that go, it really felt like that edge was gone. So you said taking the edge off, and I remember using that word, like feeling edgy.
Because it feels like there's something to be messed up. It feels like there's something that's then going to be lost. And this might be, we talked about this before, and I want to just make this one quick comment. We talked about how when you're in alignment and you have that impulse to like follow it then because it's important. But then we think if we don't follow that impulse, that opportunity was lost. No, because it's always still now. It just means that thing wasn't supposed to happen right then. The destination of whatever that was is still there. It's just a different path to the same thing. Which is why we've heard in the past different people talk about many paths to the same destination. It's just a different path, but the destination is still to achieved, which is then the launching point for the next destination, which is part of the thing that can't be messed up. It's just like missing the train or bus and taking the next one. And then you think that everything's messed up, but it's not. You're still going where you're going and you're still going to be there. But I think, and this is what I feel sometimes, is that people don't want to have any resistance, but the resistance just adds to the momentum that is going to move you forward. It's kind of like, here's a better analogy. You miss the bus, but then you catch the flight to get there anyways. So it's not like you get the next bus, you catch the flight and you get there at the same time.
I build up a belief in me that if something seems like it's going wrong or I've missed something, that's not actually what's happening, that that happened for a reason. Or if I missed that flight, someone was on that flight that I didn't want to sit next to, or maybe, the next one will be even more delightful. So that's a belief I can choose to create. And that helps take the edge off as well. But that's been a practice for me. And especially in this culture where it's like, do this at this time and rush and do more and catch up to your life faster.
Yeah.
Get this done now. Yeah.
But you said that real quick about the plane, and that story about Sedona and the retreat, how I had to miss my flight. I had to get off of it. And then as a result of it, I ended up getting in the back row with 6 seats to myself. And I took my dog Sushi with me, and she got to sit in the seat and lay down. And the stewardess kept coming back there and sitting with her and playing with her the whole time. So it went from her having to be under the seat for 2 hours, which she does not, or 3 hours that she does not like, to taking a whole row and just laying there and being treated like royalty with all the stewardess coming back there and playing with her.
I love that. I just love that.
And that's a perfect example of it. And people don't get caught up in it. This is why I say you always have to show yourself. The more you flow with it, the more you see how it's always guiding you to what is the path of least resistance. We just think that right now and this way is the path because it's happening. But if something happens and it's not moving, it's because it's moving you to something bigger and better. It's just always that. It's just, there's no way to know that until you just show yourself more and more and more. And even for myself, that is part of that practice, because I'll get attached to something and I think, ooh, this thing and this person and these experiences. And then it's like, well, that's not what it was. And there was a story about this that I'm not going to tell, but you know what I'm referring to, of last month. And then the resistance will then show itself. And then it's just easy to then notice that when you've done it enough. But it doesn't have to even be for less than 5 minutes. That's what I talk about. It can be a moment. As soon as that resistance is there, you can keep tuning and then seeing it instantly.
And that's exactly what I did in the car. And that was another part. I'm glad you mentioned that again, the practicing, because although I know these things, you really don't know them until you practice them. Yeah. And I really, and the wind is picking up, by the way, here. So you might hear that. But I showed myself in a short period of time how I could change how I was feeling. So I know I can do that again. The next time I feel anything like that, it's like the awareness of that was there. I noticed the change. It was confirmed with the text message. And so I know to do that again next time. Like it's a continual practice, like you are saying. And I know it's me. Oh, there was one more thing I'd like to add onto this about the mirror analogy, because I've used that mirror analogy as a way to orient myself to my life and people and my reality, that I've noticed when I used that as an idea, that the mirror reflections aren't always on the nose like that. They aren't always like a perfect mirror reflection. So for example, you might, or someone might give a lot, be a giver, give so much time, attention, energy, stuff to people, but feel like they don't get it back. So it's not like this perfect reflection of they're being given to and people are taking time out for them. And I just wanted to note this because that mirror analogy, it might not make a lot of sense. Like, how is that me? Or how is that a reflection of me? But the way I was able to understand that was, well, it's not always like a perfect mirror reflection like that. That's so obvious. It could be a reflection of how you are treating yourself or your self-concept. So for the giving example, if someone gives and gives and gives and gives to their own detriment and they aren't given back to, it's like a reflection of them not showing up for themselves. It's a reflection of them not giving to self. So people show them that.
Exactly.
I just wanted to remark on that, because for me, that was just something I had to think about. Like, well, how is that me? And how can I, because I really wanted to go all in and like that pearl of great price. Like if everything is me and these things really don't seem like that, how can I, like in the dream, making the fear mine, how can I make that mine and work with it? Because then, like, oh yeah, I need to give myself more. I need to give myself more time, more care. And then I will start to see that confirmed to me in my outer reality, and the ego coming down and the forgiveness, all of that has really helped me to be able to do that and to be able to practice that.
That was such a perfect thing to say, because there was like 4 or 5 things that kept coming up throughout this that were coming to me that I wanted to express on.
Yes, please.
And even at the end of what I was saying last, and that kind of really is a conglomerate of it all, which is perfect. And it goes back to intention and being in flow and like all of these things that we just talked about in this particular one, let alone all the other ones. A lot of times when people are doing that, it's because they are wanting that. So they think that doing that to others is going to come back to them, but they're doing it from a place of not lack, but they're doing it because they're wanting it instead of being it. That there is a difference. There's a difference. I love
that statement.
And so when you're being it, then you're doing it from this place of inspiration. And there's so much more energy that is flowing through you because you're being it. And now you're flowing that being to others. And then it does come back to you. But it doesn't mean it comes back to you in the exact same way. But when it comes to you, you know it because you can feel it. And this is what I was going to say. And this perfectly segues into it. And that is when you're tuning and you're doing these practices and you're in this awareness to a degree that you know that you create everything, and you have learned how to tune to something, or something comes up in meditation, or a desire is summoned, or whatever. You have a desire and there's an awareness of a really specific desire, or even a broad desire, but it's really strong. Then if you just keep practicing tuning to that, then what happens is the thoughts that are tuned to that will come in as you are practicing tuning throughout the day or weeks or months in practice, which I don't really believe anything has to take months, but you're then aware of what that feeling is like. And it's going back to what I talked about earlier, fear or love. And so when you go into that place of love, then you're aware of where those thoughts are, and you're aware of where those impulses are and actions are. And then you are able to keep tuning more and more. More and more, you're creating more energy, more momentum, more trends of those things and actions and thoughts and impulses and attractions. And you're creating that way. And then when you are taking action, it is so inspired that is from that state that you are cultivating within, you can flow so much and do so much. And then it comes back to you in exponential ways, but not necessarily in the way that you thought it would, but in ways that are surprising. It's the same thing with manifestation of anything, whether it be physical or it be personal with another human, or whether it be an event or circumstance, whatever. It's the same thing, because then what's happening is those things that you felt within, you are creating from that state. And then when it comes to you, you know what it feels like. You weren't necessarily receiving it in the exact same way that you were envisioning it. But then that way in which you're receiving it is surprising and delightful and better than you could have imagined, because your imagination is still limited to what you can perceive from what you've already experienced from this now moment, not to be what is manifested from the future that you can't yet perceive. You can't manifest the future that has so many events that are coming together that you have yet to ever experience. It's really not easy to do that. It is possible. You can meditate and start to have experiences and thoughts and ideas and visions or whatever that you haven't experienced, but it's still going to manifest bigger and broader than what that is even in that moment. So the manifestation is still always going to be different than what the initial vision is, but it's the feeling of the tuning to the frequency is what you really are experiencing. It's always the tuning to the frequency that then you feel in the moment that you know it manifests, no matter what it is, no matter what it is. And then you know it. And you know it in such a degree because you felt it for so long. And the more you are tuning to the feeling of it, the more those things come. It's so, and this is what every single person that has ever said anything from any degree of connection or alignment is talking about, whether it be Neville, Abraham, Eckhart, any of these people. It's just different degrees of this exact same thing. Different degrees of awareness of this exact same thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's like a diamond or a gem, and there's facets on it, but it's the same gem.
Yeah.
Neville would offer practices, like specific processes and techniques, but really just to help people get into the state that they wanted.
Mm-hmm.
And ultimately, he said, you can simply meditate and fall asleep feeling thankful and create that feeling within you, and the things you want will come, because if you had all those things, that you'd be feeling thankful and they'd be normal. So that's exactly that. Just get into the state and it'll surprise and delight you and be attached to all the other things you want in ways you don't even know could have been.
Yes. And that's the beauty. That's the whole beauty of it, because then it's coming to you in a surprising way.
Yes. It's just, I think like our little brains are like, we want to help. And there's a part of the brain. Well, if we're cutting it into pieces again, but apparently there's this area of the brain called the reticular activating system. And the wind is so strong right now. Oh my goodness.
I can't hear it.
This is the last thing I'll say. Okay. It might come through, but this is the last thing I'll say.
If it should probably add another element to it. So I think it'll be fine.
The wind it's happy out there. So there's energy blowing, but the reticular activating system is how our mind selects what is important, because there's so much information, so much stimuli coming in at every moment, like where your body is and your heart beating and like the temperature and the light and sound and all of that. The reticular activating system selects what from that in this soup of information or this flow is important. And it selects what's important based on what you've reacted to before.
Uh-huh.
And of course, like fundamental human things that are important. But my point is there's like this very small sliver or this one ray that comes in that you're consciously aware of. But there's this whole spectrum that you're not consciously aware of. So there's this field of things. And if you just let go of needing it to be this one little ray and that's all you can see, then I'm just saying the same thing in a different way. Like it can all come together and you just literally couldn't see it, but it could be right there. But I'm being gentle on the conscious mind. Like we want something to do. That's what the brain does. It makes thoughts and it tries and it's doing the best that it can.
But that's perfect, because that's a scientific way to observe what we are thinking, what's happening.
Yeah, it's a confirmation bias, really. Like it's just, you said this is important and the brain is like, okay, that's what I'm going to go find. And here it is, and here it is, and here it is. Some more. You want more of that? Here it is.
Yeah, and all that shows is just the awareness. So whether you're scientifically showing what is happening in a biological way in the body physically or not, it still comes down to the awareness and the attention and what are you giving to it? And your awareness is beyond just the mind. And so when you do that, you can recognize, and once again, from a logical scientific way, what is happening, and therefore how you are then creating your experience from that level of understanding. And for me, if people are aware of just that, then imagine if you continue to cultivate that day in and day out for weeks and months and years, which you then are to create and manifest, and how different your mind is, which is why I said in the beginning of this podcast, if I was to hear this stuff as my version of me from 10 years ago, I would not be able to hear it. But how did I create this version of me? Because of my intention and my awareness and how I cultivated it through these different practices, and then became this version, which is something I would have not been able to do had I not just slowly started doing that time over time. Perfect example of that.
I think one of my favorite sentences from this whole podcast is wanting it versus being it. Like that's what you said, wanting it versus being it, because those are different things. So that's gonna stick with me for sure.
I got somebody who asked a question actually. So the question we'll put for next time, but I was trying to bring up my mail. The one thing I did want to remark on is that we are going to have mats for the Me Treat, which is awesome. We're going to have yoga towels. We're going to have journals. I'm going to post that today. There has been some people that reached out. We're doing 6 to 8 in Kauai, which is interesting because we talked a lot about the Hawaiian. And that came, what's funny? When I was in Sedona in July, when I met Ashtani, she had cards out, and that was one of the cards I got. And I thought that was interesting.
What was one of the cards you got?
I forget the term, the Hawaiian phrase.
Oh, the Hawaiian prayer?
Yeah, the Hawaiian prayer. Yeah. Yeah. So I got that card actually from her when I was in Sedona in July, and then she was obviously part of our meet treat in September. So,
I got the puffin. I got the puffin card.
Oh, you did? What was the puffin card?
That was different.
Oh,
we picked our animals out of an animal deck, and I got the puffin.
Oh, that was with
Aaron.
Aaron, yeah.
Yes,
I didn't get to draw
that was fun.
Oh no, I
yes,
did.
You did.
Yes,
you did. You got the wolf, and I got the puffin.
Of course, wolf and the puffin. And then we did. She had other cards, and we got Galaxy.
I'm sorry, I interrupted what you were saying. So people have had questions. There's going to be products on the meet treats.
Yeah. So I'm going to send out the email for the Kauai thing today. People are asking questions, and I did want to remark that we had double the viewership just in the last week, which is pretty awesome. I feel like that's something to celebrate.
It's awesome.
Maybe it'll be double next week and double again and continue that trajectory. But yeah, we people are sending in questions. Definitely going to, maybe we should do that in the beginning, or should we do it at the end?
Listener questions.
Yeah.
I love that idea.
If it's at the beginning, it might set the tone for it, or.
Yeah, I love that. And then people will feel like we are listening and reading what people send. And I think it's important that we acknowledge that.
Yeah. Okay, so we'll do that. And then, we'll have 4 to 6 or 6 to 8 spots for Kauai. Going to post that or send that out today. And, we record these now on Monday and we are releasing them on Wednesdays. So we are doing these nearly in real time now. So this information is pretty relevant, I should say, to real time. And I think that was
excellent.
I think that was it. Was there anything else that you had?
No.
I'm just going to make a few notes each time from now on. I don't do that.
Well, it's good. Now there's a little teaser. There's always stuff we can talk about next time.
That's true. Yeah.
It'll be great. They just keep getting better and better.
That's absolutely true. Awesome.
But yeah, I need to go shovel and then get some food in here. I think that's something that's happening.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you so much again. You're the perfect companion. This was so much fun. I appreciate everyone joining us. This was number 8.
Number 8.
Wow. All right. Almost into double digits. Thank you again, everyone. We will see you soon. Bye.